first I just kind of want to get acquainted with what exactly your position is. Are you a Roman Catholic?
I didn't know this was an inquisition.
Oh no, I'm just interested to know the perspective of the person I'm talking to.
Well, hold on. But you wanted to debate me, now you're asking my religion. So I didn't know this was...
Are you a Roman Catholic?
I mean, am I going around asking people, are they Protestant or whatever? I mean, I thought we were going to discuss the antiquity of the Catholic Church.
So you're not a Roman Catholic then, or?
I'm a Christian.
You're a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are you? Are you what exactly?
Mormons say that as well. Can you be more specific, please?
What? Can you be more specific at what you are?
Yeah, I'm a Reformed Baptist.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm a Christian, and I believe that I believe in the Apostles' Creed. Mormons don't believe in the Apostles' Creed. That's what you were trying to compare me to.
You wouldn't align yourself with the Roman Catholic Church.
What's that?
You wouldn't align yourself with the
I thought we were going to discuss history here. I didn't know this was an interrogation.
Well, I'm just trying to understand if you're a Roman Catholic.
I'm also trying to understand. So what is your intention of asking me these questions?
Because I want to know what you believe.
Okay. But I thought we were going to get into a debate. I didn't know we were going to ask each other questions.
I don't want to refute something you don't believe.
Right, but I thought we were going to get into a debate, not ask me a million questions.
Well, I just find it interesting that we're going to debate the antiquity of the Roman Catholic Church when you won't even say you're a Catholic.
Okay.
It's kind of confusing.
Well, I read, do you read the Church Fathers?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Who is your favorite Church Father?
Oh, I don't really have a favorite. I mean, I like certain points of all of them. But,
if you had to choose one, have you read any of their books? If you had to choose one of their books, which one would you choose?
Probably Clement of Rome. I like him.
Clement of Rome?
Yeah.
Before we
get into anything, I just want to ask, do you hold to Roman Catholic theology? You might not be a Roman Catholic, but where would you agree with that?
No, I am a man who enjoys reading the Church Fathers, and so I read the Church Fathers, and I quote them. And me being a man who loves church history, and I've read Clement of Rome, I've read Ignatius of Antioch, I've read all these guys. And so I simply write about what they wrote about, and Protestant historians use them, and I write what they wrote about, and I quote them, and that's it. I don't know why I have to answer people's questions. I simply study and quote these ancient Christian writers. If someone has a deal with that, well, refute the Church Fathers. Don't come after me. Though, if somebody has an issue with what I've written, I simply will say, well, could you provide me other writers other than the Church Fathers who existed at their time? Well, you can't.
Okay, so here's my question then. Do you believe the early Church Fathers held to what modern Roman Catholicism says one must believe in order to be a Catholic?
Well, I don't know about that. But what I will say, though, is when you look at... I will concede that they... if you go back into some of the writings of these ancient fathers, like Tertullian, like Irenaeus of Leon, there was an idea that the Roman Church was the supreme church, and they even, they did have theological agreements with what Catholic doctrine would say today.
Where did Irenaeus? Do you believe Irenaeus and Tertullian affirmed what modern Rome says about the Pope, that he has papal primacy, that he gives ex cathedra statements, that he ratifies councils, making them dogmatic, that the Pope should be submitted to as leader of the church, things of that nature? Is that what you mean when you say they believed in the supremacy of the Roman Church?
Okay, let me answer that question to you. Let me read to you a statement from Tertullian. Have you ever read a book, by the way, called Against Heresies?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you ever read? You've read you've read all of it.
I'm familiar with it.
Oh, okay. Let me read to you a statement from Irenaeus of Leon in his book Against Heresies, Book 3, Chapter 3, Part 2 of Chapter 3. This is what he says. He says, since...
What was that reference? Can you just...
Book 3.
Book 3?
Of Chapter 3 of Book 3.
Chapter 3 of Book 3.
Okay. He says, quote, since, however, it would be very tedious in such a volume as this to reckon up the successions of all the churches, we do put to confusion all those who, in whatever manner, whether by an evil self-pleasing, by vainglory, or by blindness and perverse opinion, assemble in unauthorized meetings. We do this, I say, by indicating that tradition derived from the apostles of the very great, the very ancient, and universally known church, founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul, as also by pointing out the faith preached to men which comes down to our time by means of the successions of the bishops. For it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church, on account of its preeminent authority, that is, the faithful everywhere, inasmuch as the tradition has been preserved continuously by those faithful men who exist everywhere. Would you agree with this statement?
Well, I think we'd have some disagreements about what exactly he means. What do you think?
Well, would you say that the Roman Church has preeminent authority?
Well, in what context?
No. No. I quote. No. Please. I asked you. I said, for it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church, referring to the Roman Church. If you lived in the time of Irenaeus, would you agree with them?
Well, let me answer the question. Don't interrupt me.
I'm not. Go ahead. But don't ask me a question. Answer it.
We need to exegete this passage in Against Heresies 3:3, and we need to discuss the Latin word convenire on whether or not it means agree or foregather. Okay? Because scholars take both positions. You have scholars like Nicholas Vanasafe, Laurent Kleinwerk, J.N.D. Kelly, who argue that the phrase should be rendered something like every church should foregather with the Roman Church, not agree with or submit to the Roman Church as your rendering has it.
So would you foregather with the Roman Church?
The Latin can mean both, and the context is going to determine. Now, I'm going to argue that it does mean foregather, and I would foregather there. The issue is this. You shouldn't take his statement to mean that everyone must agree with Rome or submit to Rome because her bishop's decrees are infallible or something of that nature. That's anachronism. That's not actually in the text. He wasn't a papist. Instead, what he's saying here, with his use of convenire, he's saying that he's talking about the necessity of Christians at that time foregathering or having recourse to Rome so that people could witness the apostolic traditional teachings held by Christians around the world, which were preserved in Rome. That's why he then mentions Polycarp, who learned from the apostles, and he brought his teachings to Rome so that people could witness them. It has nothing to do with papal authority or papal supremacy. It has to do with the Roman Church being a good church in that many teachings from the apostles were brought there and preserved there. So therefore people should foregather there if they want to be able to see preserved true teachings which were brought there. It has nothing to do with papalism whatsoever. And in fact, in the quote, Irenaeus does not say that, after Peter was Linus or something of that nature. He says Peter and Paul ordained Linus as the first Roman bishop. So he doesn't even say Peter was the first Roman bishop. And so I don't think this text has...
So would you agree that when Irenaeus says, for it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority, would you agree that it has preeminent authority?
Well, as I explained, it doesn't mean agree. It means foregather, as the context shows. That's what the Latin word means.
Okay. So are you familiar with the Church Father Tertullian?
With regard to the preeminent authority, let me quote the Roman Catholic scholar Robert Eno, who admits that this doesn't have anything to do with Roman supremacy in the modern sense. This is what he says. The context of Irenaeus' argument does not claim that the Roman Church is literally unique, the only one of its class. Rather, he argues that the Roman Church is the outstanding example of its class, the class in question being apostolic sees. While he does speak primarily of Rome for brevity's sake, in fact, before finishing, he also referred to Ephesus and Smyrna.
Well, yes, I would agree that hold on, let me finish. I would agree that there were churches in Smyrna, in Ephesus, that were founded by the apostles. For example, the church in Smyrna was founded by John, and also the apostle Philip was also involved in founding churches in Asia Minor. And then you can go to Egypt and you have St. Mark. You have the church in Ethiopia, and that can go back to Philip because he preached and baptized to the Ethiopian. I have no problem with that at all. I believe in apostolic succession. So let me ask you this. When you go to the Middle East, and you go, for example, to Turkey today, and you see the oldest churches, or when you read Byzantine history, when you read ancient Christian history, or whether it be in the 6th century or the 7th century, or even in the 10th century, we find patriarchs, we find priests, we find the Eucharists, we find all of these things. It doesn't matter if I read the Alexiad, which is a very good history on the Byzantine Empire. It doesn't matter if I read the church histories, let's say, of Eusebius, or the church history of Theodoretus, or the church histories of Agrarios. What we find always is the same thing. We find the church, we find the bishops, we find the priests, we find the rituals, we find all of these things. And even when you go to the Middle East today, you go to the oldest Christian communities, be they in Malula, be they in Mosul, be they even in Israel today, you find the ancient Christian communities there. None of them are evangelical or Protestant. They all consider themselves Orthodox or Catholic. So answer me this. When we go to the book of Acts, we read that Paul founded churches. Hold on, don't disrupt me. I didn't disrupt you. We find that Paul founded churches in Syria, and also that the apostles founded churches in what is today called Turkey, and also in Iraq, Mesopotamia. So what happened to those churches? Did they all turn apostate? Were they all invaded by Catholics or Orthodox?
Okay, first of all, to finish up with the Irenaeus thing, he doesn't give primacy or preeminence to Rome in a papal sense. Okay, he says it's preeminent because he believed everyone should flock there, since true teaching from the apostles was preserved there through people like Polycarp and a line of bishops. But it has nothing to do with a pope who has, supreme papal power over the world. He just doesn't teach things like that.
Well, no one. Hold on. But because you go to the point I brought up.
As for your other claims, where you say that these early churches founded by the apostles have things like a priesthood, the Roman Catholic view of the Mass, transubstantiation, things of this nature, I would contest each one of those points that you asserted. You did not prove anything.
No, I didn't assert anything. I asked you. Please. I asked you who took over these churches. When did they become so corrupt? There's no Christians who look like you. I find Father Macarius. Let me finish. I find Father Macarius, who has a church up there in Egypt, and he follows what you would deem as heresies. So when did these churches all of a sudden get taken over?
Okay, so you mentioned some books, so I'll mention some for you. With regards to early Christians, primitive Christians in the early church, affirming things Protestant essentials such as sola fide, you could pick up Thomas Oden's book.
Oh, no. I'm not going to let you switch. Please deal with the subject that I brought up. When did these churches turn corrupt and evil, and you guys have to pop up and save the day?
Well, when you read church history, you can slowly see a degradation in their soteriology. But when you look at the earliest Christian writings, there was a strong strand of sola fide. There was a strong strand of sola scriptura. If you look at John Gill's book, The Cause of God and Truth...
No. I'm not going to get into John Gill, some Puritan writer. I'm asking you, what happened to these churches in Egypt, where you have the oldest churches in the world, in Egypt, in Turkey, in Iraq? I want to know what happened. Did they all of a sudden turn corrupt and evil?
Like you.
Did they need you guys to save the day? So the only true church is found where? In the Western world?
Well, on that issue, I would argue historically and biblically that the Roman Church was cut off by God prior to the Reformation leading up to it.
How do you know that?
But, well, I'll explain it to you if you let me finish. Because of all of its abominations, and you can see God's sovereign hand over the Reformation, enabling it to take place.
Who decides God's sovereign hand? You?
Pardon me?
Who decides God's sovereign hand? You?
God does, and he shows it.
So you determine when God does things, when God doesn't do things.
Well, I think if you examine the evidence and you deny God's sovereignty over the Reformation, then you'd have to be a fool.
I asked you for that. How do you know when God's hand is in something? So what about Egypt? I mean, what about all these Coptic Christians? What about all the Coptic Christians, let's say in the year 611, who were invaded by the Arabs when they were under the Byzantine Empire? They believed in all the things that you despise. Okay, were they all heretics? The Muslims invaded them, and they're still there today, being suppressed by the Muslims under Sharia. The Christians in Turkey are also being suppressed under Sharia. The Christians in Iraq, the Christians in Syria. I mean, I can go on and on. They all agree in transubstantiation. They all agree in priests. They all agree in confessions. What happened? I mean, did God all of a sudden cut them off too and just had to allow the Reformation to be the light to the world?
Are you going to let me answer, or are you going to...
I mean, you don't answer. You keep bringing up the Reformation. I'm asking you, what happened to these Christians in Egypt?
Yeah, I know your question. I'm going to answer it, but I'm asking if you'll let me actually answer this time.
If you can, go ahead, answer it.
Okay, you asserted that those people all believed what you believe and not what I believe, but you haven't demonstrated that. Anyone can assert things.
Okay.
Now, the issue with the Reformation is this. How do I know God's sovereign hand was in it? Well, you can see. For example, Johann Gutenberg, he built his printing press in the 1400s. If that didn't happen, then the Reformation literature would not be able to spread and succeed.
You do know he was Catholic, right?
The Reformation would not have been able to develop.
Okay.
You had the rise of universities and Renaissance humanism. So, that was very necessary for the Reformation.
So there was no universities with Catholics?
Well, God can use anything, right?
So let me ask you this. So during the Crusades, when the Crusades were fighting the Muslims, who were the true Christians?
Oh, so you're going to interrupt me and go back on your word.
No, I'm not going back on my word.
I mean, it's for God's sovereignty over the Reformation.
But, I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, people invent things all the time. Doesn't mean that, the hand of God is in the Reformation. Mormons can argue that.
5 arguments cumulatively, which I believe prove God's sovereignty over this. Okay, so you have the rise of universities and Renaissance humanism, which was necessary because in the medieval period, as you may or may not know, there was a degradation of learning. But with the Renaissance and humanism, that is the idea that God created man so he could, learn and had a capacity to learn God's revelation. That sprung up. That's what the Reformers adopted. Then in the 14th and 15th centuries, there was a stress by theologians and academics on going back to the original sources for study. That's what the Latin slogan ad fontes meant, to the sources. It signified that attitude. Luther picked up on that. Calvin picked up on that. If this didn't happen, then the Reformation as we know it would not have spread. Then you had Erasmus printing the first ever Greek New Testament, which Luther studied, got his hands on, and then found out all of the wrong things Rome got with its Latin Vulgate, such as translating Matthew 3:2's use of metanoia to penance instead of repentance as it should be. There was no penance in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. So had God not ordained this event, Luther would not have discovered what he did, these important vital issues. Then you had Johann Reichling's Hebrew grammar, which was necessary for the Reformers to study. That was done right before the Reformation. Then you have all these abominations of Rome, like the Inquisition.
What's wrong with the Inquisition?
Papal corruption.
What's wrong with the Inquisition?
Which gave the Reformers...
Hold on. What's wrong with the Inquisition?
Necessary taste in their mouth.
Hold on. What's wrong with the Inquisition?
All this had to happen in order...
What is wrong with the Inquisition?
Have you studied the Inquisition?
Yes, I have.
Which books have you read on them?
I've read Henry Kamen, I've read Edward Peters, and I've read several primary sources on the Inquisition. What's wrong with the Inquisition?
Okay, so are you okay with Rome obliterating entire civilizations?
Which civilizations? Which civilizations?
Inquisition, such as the Waldensians and Cathars?
Hold on. You're telling me the Cathars were Christians?
Children in one...
Were the Cathars Christians, sir?
Like that?
Were the Cathars Christians?
Well, the Albigenses had decent theology, but there's debate on if the Cathars held to truly heretical things like dualism, Gnosticism, but there's a debate on that, you see. But either way, you shouldn't go into a civilization, root out all of its people, kill all their priests, and just massacre the women and children.
You do realize that the Cathars were not Christians, right?
Well, I just explained there's a debate on if they were truly heretical. But, you know, there is evidence that they did hold some important Orthodox truths.
So those were the true Christians that came from the apostles?
Did not like.
Hold on, were those the true Christians who came from the apostles?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so where did they come from?
I don't know exactly where they come from. You mean...
So you don't know even... So hold on. So you don't even know where they come from, yet you're sympathizing with them. You don't even know what they believed in. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, at the beginning of this debate, you cared about what I believed in, but you don't care about what they believed in.
I thought you were asking, is there claims to a line going back to early times true? And I'm not persuaded of that. I don't know exactly how far you can trace them.
Hold on, don't change the subject. Hold on. You believe that the Cathars were true Christians?
I do know that the Cathars held to Orthodox teachings, and they should...
Such as what?
Eliminated. That's what I know.
Such as what? So what did they believe in that was Orthodox?
Well, if you want to look into you can look at both the Waldensians and the Cathars. Let's see here. They denied praying to, or having masses for saints and praying to saints. That's Orthodox. They denied purgatory. That's Orthodox.
Do you know that they had a pope?
Pardon me?
Do you know that they had a pope?
Well, like I said, not everything...
Have you ever heard of the Cathar Council at St. Felix de Caramon in 1167? They actually appointed Pope Niquinta to hold the seat of the little papacy that they invented.
Do you think that justifies killing all their women and children?
Well, hold on a second. Do you know about the Cathar War? Do you know who started the Cathar War? Hold on. So just because they killed people, because the Catholics kill people, that means that they're an abomination?
No, there's many things that prove they're an abomination, such as the selling of indulgences, like I said, such as popes selling their papal office for 1,000 pounds of silver. For example, popes mutilating past popes, putting them on mock trial and having their body thrown into the river. Popes having orgies in the Vatican. You know,
so Protestants never have orgies? What about your friend James White? I remember I heard him say that God destined women to be raped, and the evil proceeded from God. And although it was purposeless, God created something that was purposeless, and it just so happened to be rape. Like, that's not an abomination?
Okay, so now you want to get into a debate on if the Bible teaches God's sovereignty?
No, I'm saying, if you want to say that that is an abomination, I can point out things that Protestants do that are abomination.
One is only accountable if they are free in the matter. Is that your position?
I'm not going to argue predestination with you. I'm saying that it's a disgusting thing to believe that God destined rape. Would you agree that it's a disgusting thing to believe that God destined rape?
No, that White's position is actually that although God decrees whatsoever comes to pass, he leaves the sinful person in their depravity who willingly...
That's not what he said. He said the evil proceeded from God. And you're going to tell me that's not an abomination.
When did he say that?
He said that on the Bible Answer Man show a number of years ago.
That evil proceeded from God.
Yeah, the evil proceeded from God. And you're going to tell me that all of a sudden is not that's a great thing to say? Would you say that?
You're a liar.
I'm not a liar. And also, I would like to read to you something. Have you ever read the book on the principle of evil?
The principle of evil?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's a Cathar book. It's a book that we had, not written by Catholics, but it's written by Cathars. And let me read to you what it says. It says here, "It is perfectly clear from scriptures that the God and Lord who is the creator of the world is different from him to whom the blessed commend their spirits. Our opponents, the Catholics, say that according to Genesis, the Lord is the creator of the visible things of this world, the heaven and the earth, the sea, men, beasts, birds, and reptiles. But I say that the creator of the visible things of this world is not the true God. Would you say that the creator of the visible things in this world is not the true God? Would you agree with that?"
Okay, so are you saying that...
Yes or no? I mean, don't use this sophism with me. Yes or no?
Is that what the Cathars wrote?
That's what the Cathars wrote. Would you agree with that?
How do you know that that's actually from them?
It's a Cathar book.
How do you know that?
Well, I can show you a very reputable historian named Edward Peters, very reputable historian of Renaissance and medieval history, who has documented all of these things.
Okay, so
you're now denying it because what? So would you agree with that statement? Yes or no? Simple question.
Does that scholar state that the Cathars wrote that?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
And I would like for you to tell me, yes or no, is this orthodox?
If they believe that, I'm not going to say they didn't.
Is it orthodox? Simple question.
Your sources.
Would you say that the creator of the visible things of this world is not the true God?
The Cathars had a very high view of Scripture.
So now you're defending the Cathars. I would like to know, yes or no, you would agree with this statement.
Lived lives of holiness, okay? They sought to live in holiness.
Now you're changing the subject. I would like for you to tell me yes or no if this is orthodox
They
statement.
did hold to some orthodox beliefs. They probably held to some heretical beliefs, but that does not excuse the Roman religion from massacring.
So hold on, now you're changing the subject. Would you say this is orthodox?
I think the fair-minded person will see that I already conceded they may have believed that.
Please, don't talk like that. Yes or no? Let's be straightforward here.
Excuse me, sir, but I already answered that.
Yes or no?
I already answered.
Yes or no? Is that orthodox?
Here's my question for you.
No. I asked you a question. You're not answering it. Would you say that the creator of the visible things of this world is not the true God?
10 to 20,000 believers see Thompson's Inquisition in history.
How many people were killed?
Philip Schaff goes on to note neither age nor sex was spared. Church walls.
Yeah. And when Joshua invaded the Canaanites, was age or sex spared?
St. Magdalene's Church alone. Do you agree with the Catholic Church doing that to those women and children?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes, I do. Unlike you, I actually give straightforward answers. Now, would you say that the creator of the visible things of this world is not the true God?
Testament.
I asked you a question. Don't smart mouth me. Yes or no? Is it orthodox?
For my question.
Is it orthodox? Don't sophism me.
Okay, you're on.
Yes or no?
A rational
The creator of the visible things of this world is not the true God. Yes or no? Orthodox or not orthodox?
Oh, that's not orthodox.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a straightforward answer. So you would agree that these Cathars were not saints?
I already discussed that issue, and I said it's not relevant. They shouldn't.
It is relevant. Hold on a second.
Because although they probably did hold to some perverse views, they did hold to some orthodox views, but the fact of the matter is you should not go and murder 10 to 20,000 of their women and children in a church who were trying to hide.
So was Joshua wrong when he spared neither sex nor age?
Is despicable. Okay, Old Testament wars were in a different context. They're not like Islam where we're told to go and do jihad all over the world nowadays. Those were for a specific time, a specific command to do those things.
Would you agree that the Crusades were wrong then?
Told us to go and do those things.
Hold on. So then would you say that the Crusades were wrong?
Well, when the Catholics battled the Muslims who were trying to take over the world, I think that is a just war theory.
Oh, so now it's a just war. So what about so
going to innocent women and children who are not trying to kill you and massacring them, that's a completely different issue.
So you do know that when the Crusades invaded Jerusalem, they butchered women, children, old people, and they say that the blood went all the way up to the hooves of the horses. Would you say that's right?
I disagree with that part.
Oh, so you disagree with that part. But you do agree with the Crusades.
Fighting Islam when it's trying to take over the world, but I disagree with, killing women and children, Jesus Christ in the New Covenant.
So what about America bombing Japan? Was that wrong? Because women and children were killed.
You know, I think they could have did a test launch in the desert and showed a Japanese ambassador instead of actually bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
So when the Japanese butchered 10 million Chinese people and butchered 200,000 people in 7 weeks at Nanking, would you say that that the Japanese didn't deserve, or they did deserve, to be attacked? Because I think that butchering 10 million people in China and 30 million people in total around the world was a just act. Oh, no, that wasn't just, but attacking these evil people who were doing this, that was a just act.
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay.
I mean, that's the true Quoque fallacy.
So you do realize that the Albigensians were Hold on. Do you know... hold on a second. Hold on a second.
10 to 20,000 women and children hiding in a church is satanic, and for you to believe that that's okay makes you an antichrist. That's not.
That makes me an antichrist. So to say, hold on. So to say that the Lord God who made the world is not the true God, that's not antichrist?
I didn't say that.
But is that antichrist or not antichrist?
if they actually believe that, and it is debated.
Well, everything's debated. Creation is debated.
But
So
to kill them off, to massacre their women and children, instead of evangelizing them and trying to discuss rationally with their people.
hold on a second, but they did evangelize to the Cathars. There were numbers of popes for a number of years, actually, before the Albigensian Crusade, where, for example, you had, I forgot his name, it was Spanish, Guzman, who went there, who was commissioned by the Pope to evangelize to them. There was no violence done to the Cathar until the Cathars, St. Dominic Guzman, that was his name. Yeah, he preached to the Cathars for years. There was no violence done to the Cathars until the Cathars made first blood, when they murdered Peter Castanal.
So you think, therefore, that because someone in that movement murdered someone, that you're to therefore not arrest him, but instead wipe out all their people?
Well, that's because Raymond VI refused to bring those people to justice. Just as, for example, let's look at the scripture here. Judges chapter 19, a bunch of pagans killed one woman, and all the tribes of Israel went to war with that one tribe and butchered women and children, simply for the reason that their elders did not want to deliver the culprits. So yeah, a whole city could suffer because the politicians in that city reflect the depravity of that city.
So where did Jesus Christ ordain for you to go and wipe out women and children for the new covenant?
Well, of course, he wouldn't have to ordain that, because he didn't come to declare a temporal war, but he did, in fact, come to declare a spiritual war against Satan. You and I both could agree with that. In 1 John chapter 3, that's what John says, Christ came to destroy the works of Satan. So, of course, there was a spiritual war that Christ came. But, for example, you could go to Romans chapter 13 or in 1 Peter 2:14, where it talks about the role of governors punishing the wicked and obeying the righteous. So the idea of just war, of course, can be justified through the scriptures. And also when you...
According to you, Jesus Christ would say that it's just for the Roman religion to organize a crusade against women and children, Cathars and Albigenses, wipe out their civilization. That's...
Well, would you believe? Well, since you believe in predestination and God's sovereignty, would you believe that God destined the Crusades to happen?
My position is that freedom, responsibility.
Did God destine the Crusades to happen?
Responsibility does not require freedom. So those people are accountable. What they do is wrong. And although everything is part of God's plan in history, those people are still nevertheless accountable. That's what Scripture teaches.
Well, they're accountable because they had that free choice, just as Adam and Eve were accountable and they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden.
God's hand to, take people against Christ and, have Christ murdered, such as Pontius Pilate, Herod, the Jews and the Gentiles. It was God's predestined plan in hand for that to take place, and yet, nevertheless, the culprits were punished for murdering Christ. So yes.
Well, let me ask you something. During the Crusades,
ordained by God, people are still accountable. Things are still evil. That doesn't change the fact.
Okay, so let me ask you. During the Crusades, during the Crusade, the first Crusade, who were... Okay, go ahead.
Question for you. Do you agree with Ignatius of Antioch when he says, quote, "Nothing is more precious than peace, by which all war, both in heaven and on earth, is brought to an end"?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course I do. I'm not a man who believes in just going out and killing people, but sometimes peace is established through war, and that's what Saint Augustine actually said in his letter to Boniface. But let me ask you something. Since you bring up the atrocities that were done to the Albigensian, let me tell you something here. There was actually a number of massacres that were done by the Albigensians toward Catholics. For example, in one Catholic monastery, there was found 150 people mutilated by the Cathars. The hands and the feet of the men were cut off, the eyes were torn out, women had their own nipples lacerated, and their thumbs were cut off. And they had their nipples lacerated because they wanted to prevent the women from breastfeeding their children. So would you say that this is a great thing, or what? I mean, would you say this is justified? Is this not terrorism?
I think that is wrong, but that does not justify massacring the women and children in the numbers that they did.
Oh, okay, so if you lived in the ancient Middle East, and Moses said, "Go forth and wipe out all the people," would you say that's right?
Well, I think if you look at the ancient Near Eastern literary device known as exaggeration rhetoric, you will see that when many people in the ancient Near East, used utter destruction.
So the Bible is exaggerating.
Their women and children, things of this nature, that was just hyperbolic, and it was meant to denote a decisive war victory. But if you look in those same books...
Whoa. You're saying the Bible is exaggerating?
Me, sir.
Is the Bible accurate?
Later in the book, you will see that there were still people of those tribes living who were said to be utterly rooted out. And so you need to read, for example...
Well, of course, but they were Canaanites who converted to the worship of the true God.
So I think you don't understand Scripture on that point.
Well, no, I mean, it says quite clearly that when Joshua entered Jericho, he killed old man, woman, man, and elderly and young people. Even
as I explained.
So you say that's justified?
The Old Testament used the ancient Near East hyperbolic word.
So there were no children that were killed.
Known as exaggeration.
Hold on, you sound like a liberal theologian. Just stop for a second. You're saying there was no children and old people killed?
I'm saying that when you look at the specific incidents, you will see that that's part
So
of
no old people were killed by Joshua? No young people, no infants, none of that going on?
No.
There was none of that?
No.
So you just deliberately and explicitly rejected what the scripture says in the book of Joshua when it says that he slaughtered old people, young people. And what about when... Let
me answer that. There's some examples. For example, Egypt's Thutmose III. You have the Hittite king Mershuli II. You have the bulletin of Ramses II. You have Moab king Medes.
And what do they say? What do these texts says? So what do these texts say?
And they all say similar things. Utterly root out, kill the women and children, all this.
Yeah, and the Egyptians did do things like that. Have you ever seen their hieroglyphs? Where you have King Pharaoh Amun with all the heads of his victims lined up, and he's chopped up all the heads? I mean, haven't you seen the hieroglyphs?
You're going to let me finish making my...
Because I'm not going to allow stuff that's just absurd to say without me saying something. I'm not going to let you take the show. This is not your show. This is a discussion.
It's not absurd.
We're having a discussion.
I'll give you the evidence to prove it's not absurd. Let's take the Canaanites, for example, okay? We're told in Deuteronomy 7, 1-2, that they were to devote them to complete destruction, things of this nature, women and children. But however, if you examine Judges 2-3, you see that concerning the 7 Canaanite nations, the angel of the Lord stated, quote, "I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become the thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you," unquote. So this utterly destroy them language wasn't to be taken literally, because afterwards, many Canaanites were still alive.
Well, I know that. We agree that there were Canaanites still alive. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, but when I asked you, no women and children were killed, and you say no, that's absurd. I mean, the text clearly says that women and children were killed by Joshua's army. Hello?
Where does it say that?
In the book of Joshua. You've never read this? You never read this term?
Yes, I have. Are you talking about Joshua 6?
Yes.
Okay, that's exactly the same thing as with these other checks. Woman, infant, child in 1 Samuel 15:3. Both women and children, young and old, in Joshua 6:21. Deuteronomy 3:6. All these texts that I mentioned with the Canaanites have that as well. Even with Saul and the Amalekites.
But you know for a fact that no women and children were killed.
It says, "Do not spare them, but kill both men and women." Okay, utterly root them out. But the fact of the matter is, later in 1 Samuel 27:8, we see that there are Amalekites still living. Even though it said it was accomplished, this "do not spare them, kill both male, man and woman, child and infant," all of them. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is, if you actually examine Copin's work, where he cites all these scholars, where he cites contemporaneous examples, this was a common device simply denoting war victory.
So you know for a fact that, I'm trying to get this thing clear. You know for a fact that Joshua never killed old people and young people.
We see later in the book that there are Amalekites still living. And
so what? So, excuse me, after the Albigensian Crusade, there were still Albigensians living.
Your problem. Yeah, but it's not...
So in Joshua 6:21 it says, the swords they killed, with their swords they killed men and women, young and old. You're saying this isn't true?
I'm saying if you look at similar...
Yes or no, is it true?
I'm saying if...
You can never answer a yes or no question, which tells me you're a sophist. Yes or no?
You know, people need to qualify their answers.
I don't. I gave you straight. I give you straight up answers, sir. When you ask me a question, I don't sit there and equivocate everything. 6:21, when it says they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and women, young and old. Is this true?
If the text says it was carried out that all of them, young and old, male and female, were killed, and yet later we see in the same book that there are people living, then obviously it's not literal. And when we look at these ancient accounts that are contemporaneous, for example, Egypt's Thutmosis III boasted that the numerous army of Mitanni was overthrown within an hour, annihilated totally, like those now non-existent.
So now Tukhtamus, so now you're saying the text of a pagan, Tukhtamus, dictates what we know about Scripture.
15th and 14th centuries BC. We see the Hittite king Mushili II, right? He recorded, quote, the Mount Ashepra empty of humanity, and yet there were still people living. And so this was a common ancient Near Eastern literary device, which you need to understand.
So no woman, no young, no old were killed by Joshua.
Similar material.
Excuse me, you're not answering the question. No young, no old, no women were killed.
Well, if it says all of them...
I'm not asking if all women were killed. I'm asking young, old women, were they killed by Joshua, yes or no?
And there's no reason to assume that any children were actually killed.
So this is not true. When it says that women, young children were... None of that happened.
It's ancient Near Eastern rhetoric.
So the Bible is now rhetoric.
It's exaggeration rhetoric.
So the Bible exaggerates things.
It's just a literary device.
Excuse me. So you know for a fact... You sound like a liberal theologian. You know for a fact... You know for a fact that there was no young people, no old people, none of that killed. No one was killed.
They were all wiped out. I'm quoting to you Copan, who's a scholar.
I don't care. Listen, I'm asking you a simple question. Yes or no? There was no young people or there was young people killed? Old people, were they old people killed?
Scholars who agree.
Were they old people killed? Don't read to me out of a book. Tell me from your heart. Were they old people or young people killed?
Of the material.
Were they young people or old people killed?
Well, I've already answered the question.
Yes or no?
If it says all were killed and yet we see later that they're still living, we don't have to assume that...
So nobody was killed. So nobody was killed. So nobody was killed.
I didn't say nobody was killed.
So who was killed? Since you know so much about what happened there, who was killed?
Well, when armies would battle armies and they would say, destroy everybody, leave no one living, it was just a way to say, you know, we're going to have a decisive victory against their army. And that's what these parallel accounts show. And that's what the text show, where later you see the evidence of the tribe still existing.
So there were Canaanite remnants. We know that, but I'm asking you: there was no children killed.
Well, there were Amalekite remnants as well.
We know that there were remnants.
Massive number.
We know that there were remnants.
Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant. So your point's refuted, sir.
It's not refuted. It's not refuted at all. But back to the discussion it's not refuted at all, because the Bible makes it very clear that young people and old people and infants were killed by the armies. And you just made an assumption and said, well, when two armies battled, excuse me, no. When Muslims invaded cities, they killed women and children and all that. When Crusaders invaded cities, they killed women and children. This was, if you want to use the ancient world, we can use the ancient world. And even if you go into it, the Egyptians had no problem with killing babies. They killed the firstborn. So why is it all of a sudden the Bible is there was no children killed when the Scripture?
With the soldiers.
Hold on. I'm talking. Hold on. When there were children that were killed by the Hebrews when they invaded the Canaanites, you completely reject that. So you just admitted to me that you reject what Scripture says, that there were children killed. In fact, if you, I know you're going to contest the one word all, but I'm not here to argue the word all. I'm here to argue that there were children killed. You reject that idea. And you reject what the Scripture states. Yes, you reject the idea that they were children. So you don't. So there were children killed.
Excuse me. When a text says, and it's in a war context, to utterly root them out, destroy them, young and old, and yet we see later that didn't happen, and that, there's remnants. And then we look at...
How does that indicate that that didn't happen because there was remnants?
And then we look at the contemporaneous accounts where you have ancient Near Eastern cultures also talking about this, where there's a war situation and they're going up against an army, and they talk about wiping out the whole civilization, and yet we know there was still that tribe...
So now you're equating the armies of God with pagan armies?
I'm saying that they utilize this literary device, which is common.
Okay, so I'm asking you, so now pagan texts now dictate how we interpret Scripture. So what about, for example, what about, for example, in the first 5 books of Moses, when... Hold on, let me finish now. Hold on a second. Stop. I'm talking. Hold on. I didn't disrupt you. What about when Moses says that if a woman is pregnant, you have to kill them when you invade the pagan lands?
Pardon me?
Hold on. What about when it says that when Moses says that when you go to the land of these heathens and you have a pregnant woman, you can't spare the pregnant women?
What text are you referring to?
In the first 5 books of Moses.
Pardon me?
In the first 5 books of Moses, Moses says that if you meet a pregnant, when you go into these lands and you have a pregnant, if a woman is not pregnant, then you cannot spare the pregnant women.
You cannot spare the pregnant women?
You can't spare the pregnant women.
What text are you referring to?
Can I find it for you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Therefore, kill every man among little ones. Kill every woman that hath no man by lying with him, but all the women and children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. Yes.
Okay, so the fact is that the virgins were spared, so the whole civilization was not wiped out.
So you would agree, hold on a second, but that's not what I was arguing. I was never arguing for a whole civilization. I was arguing with you that women and children were killed, and that's what we're arguing about here.
They're utterly destroyed.
Okay, so I'm not arguing it. I'm not arguing it because when the Catholics defeated the Albigensian, they also spared a lot of people. Most Albigensians weren't killed after the war. Okay, so no, it is true. It is true because that's why they had the Inquisition. That is why they had the Inquisition after the Crusade, because there were remnants left. So no, they were not everybody was killed in the Albigensian Crusade. Have you ever read? Tell me something. Have you ever read The History of the Albigensian Crusade by Peter de Val de Sarney?
Yeah, read Williston Walker.
No. I asked you, did you read this book, The History of the Albigensian Crusade?
Have you read Williston Walker?
Have you read the History of the Albigensian Crusade?
Have you read Williston?
I asked you first. Did you read this book?
No,
By Peter. Okay, this was written by a man who lived in the time of the Albigensian Crusade. He lived in the time of the Albigensian Crusade. He was in the Albigensian Crusade. He endured the toils and the labors of war. But hold on, please. Let me finish now.
Coming through. Hello?
Hold on. Are you hearing me?
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. So
No.
have you read Williston Walker's History of the Christian Church?
Hold on. Let me tell you about this book, though.
No,
I haven't read it. No. But let me tell you about this book. In this book, it states quite clear that the Albigensian, they were taking over the land of France. They were, and in fact, if there's actually a number of other good books out there. You have John Riley Smith's History of the Crusades and all that. But there's other good books out there that discuss this. But the Albigensians were heretics who came from the teachings of Mani, who was a Gnostic. I'm sure you know about this stuff. Who was a Gnostic heretic. And so they were invading France. They were taking over France. They started in Albion, and they were in southern France, and they were just expanding and expanding and expanding. And at first, the Catholic Church conducted a system of evangelization with Saint Dominic of Guzman and others. But these programs of evangelization didn't work. But they continued on anyway. It is when the Raymond VI, who was really the head of the Albigensian in Albi, or in what do they call? I forgot the name of the city, but anyway, it was him who killed Peter Castelnau, who was a prelate for the Vatican. When the Vatican confronted Raymond VI, Can I please finish? No. Let me finish. When the Vatican confronted Raymond VI on this, he refused to do anything.
Rooted out by the 14th century.
What's that?
You agree the Cathars were rooted out by the 14th?
Oh, they were definitely suppressed, and there was a lot of them killed. I'm not going to deny it. Unlike you, I give people straightforward answers.
You say they were suppressed.
What's that?
I said serious historians affirm that they were utterly rooted out by the 14th century.
Absolutely.
They were suppressed, right?
They were rooted out. Many of them were massacred by the great armies of. They were not utterly rooted out because they were remnants left. What? Hold on a second. No, they were remnants left of this group. That's why they had the Inquisition. I mean, you know about the Inquisition. So no, they were remnants left of it.
Inquisition. I'm talking about the fact that they were destroyed by the Inquisition, the medieval.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. They were eventually rooted out, absolutely, and rightfully so. In fact, I mean, so what if they're rooted out? If you look into the book of Joshua, for example, chapter 8, it says, with the Lord's approval, Joshua utterly smited the people of Ai, killing 12,000 men and women. It says that he killed women as well. 12,000 men and women. In Joshua chapter 8, when they invaded the city of Ai.
I've already addressed this.
Is the 12,000 an exaggeration?
Well, I've already addressed this issue, people.
No. I'm talking about this specific event. Joshua 8. 12,000 men and women were killed by the armies of the Israelites. Was this an exaggeration?
Well, if it's men and women, 12,000, that's probably not. But you know what?
It's probably not. So women were killed. Hold on. No, we're getting somewhere now. So women were killed.
When you have utterly destroyed them language...
You just contradicted yourself. You don't understand. Stop talking. Stop. You contradicted yourself. Stop. You're contradicting yourself. You said no women and children were killed. Now I find you a verse where women and children were killed.
For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Jesus also taught, and as you wish that others would do to you.
Don't switch the subject now. Don't switch the subject. Don't switch. Excuse me, sir. Don't switch the subject. You said women and children were not killed. In Joshua chapter 8, women and men are killed.
Moreover,
12,000. You just keep talking. You don't want to hear truth, I know. But 12,000 men and women were killed.
This is the issue. Although there were certain cases where there were men and women killed, I'll grant that.
Now there are certain cases. So you grant that. So it is okay for a holy army to kill women and children. Yes.
Entire civilizations are killed, which is the parallel.
What civilization? Hold on. So now you're defending heretics. So let's see. You are hesitant to attack the Cathars. Now you are defending heretics who were aggressors against Catholics. So I guess Catholics need to just
eliminate their children because Jesus didn't establish that for the new covenant.
So now you're defending the Canaanites. You're defending the Cathars. You are defending Cathar doctrine because you're very hesitant to condemn it. But Catholic, you have to condemn it all the time. Everything Catholics do is wrong.
Cathars, as I admitted, were heretics.
Okay. So, but you said before there was some debate between that.
Evil Roman religion, which does not resemble what Christ taught in the New Testament.
So tell me something. In the time of the Albigensian Crusade, who were the true Christians?
Go and jihad and kill all the women and children. Nowhere did Jesus Christ teach that.
So tell me something. In the time of the Albigensian Crusade, who were the true Christians? You just keep talking over me. You don't stop. You're like a broken record. You're like a broken record. In the time of the Albigensian Crusade, who were the true Christians?
Where did Jesus, for the New Covenant Church, say, go kill women and children?
Excuse me, where does Jesus say that Israel must have an IDF army to bomb Gaza and to kill Palestinians? But yet we are all pro-Israel, you and I. So I don't see where you're coming with this. There's nothing wrong with a just war. And the Israelis are justified for bombing Gaza, even though they do kill children, even though they do kill women and children. So are those justified?
Hamas puts children in weapons cache sites, and Israel does not intentionally.
So what?
But you're saying you can intentionally go and kill women and children, and that's
Joshua.
Jesus Christ.
Joshua.
Part of the new covenant, and in fact.
So where in the New Testament does it say you can't have wars?
do not have women and children killed. Granted, there were some cases with men and women, but the utterly root them out...
Was that wrong?
...language is not literal. It's hyperbolic, Near Eastern...
Excuse me, Matthew 22, sir. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who sends out his servants, and the people in the city kill those servants, and the king sends forth his armies to destroy that city. Christ used an example of war in his parables, sir. So, and not only that, but Christ went to the centurion, and we all know the centurion soldiers were no joke. Those people killed. And he says, I find no man with greater faith than he, not in all of Jerusalem. And then the two soldiers go to John the Baptist and say, John, what do we do? He says, do not plunder and be content with your wages. So there's nothing wrong for Christians to wage out war. But it seems as though the only countries that can wage out war are Americans, when they bomb Japan, and Israel can also launch wars, but Catholics can't. Catholics have to just sit down and let their culture get taken over.
So none of those texts actually state that it's okay for Christians to go...
Excuse me, Jesus gives the example of a king who destroys a city in Matthew 22.
Wars, armies against armies, that's a general issue. He's not talking about...
So Jesus used an example that he was against.
That's not
Jesus used an example that he was against.
The text that I mentioned, where Christ does...
Excuse me.
...would negate and override those texts. For example, put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will perish.
Ah, yes, and he also says, Peter, I must also let this cup pass. Peter, you're hindering. Peter, in other words, was hindering the plan of salvation. And he says, Peter, I can't let you stop what I'm going to do. Put your sword back into your sheath. And when you read Augustine, or when you read, for example, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux and these other church fathers, they make it very clear. Stop, let me finish. They make it very clear that the sword remains in the sheath of Peter. And Jesus didn't say, Peter, get rid of your sword. He didn't say, dispose of your sword. He says, Peter, keep your sword in your sheath.
You know why he had a sword?
It's not the time. No. But I'd like for you to confront here what I'm saying.
For actually slaughtering people, as you think. The reason Peter had a sword was not even for violence. It was to fulfill prophecy. That's what Christ said.
But he said, put your sword back into your sheath. And there was two swords that Peter had. And when you look into the teaching of the Catholic Church, for example, in Saint Bernard of Clairvaux... No, sir, you never let me finish. He said, put the sword back into your sheath. Don't get rid of your sword.
Yeah, do you know why he had the sword?
I know what you're going to say, to fulfill prophecy.
Well, why do you think he had it?
Well, of course, it would be to fulfill prophecy. But the fact...
Civilizations, women and children?
But the fact that he told Peter to keep your sword and don't throw it away means that the sword still remains in the church.
He fulfilled.
But it does mean that the church remains.
Commanded them to buy a sword.
Have you ever heard the interpretation of Saint Ambrose?
Numbered with the transgressor.
Have you ever heard?
It was 2 swords, not 12, showing it wasn't for war. 2 would hardly be enough if it was for war.
I've heard this interpretation before, but hold on. But Jesus tells the disciples to individually buy swords, not just for Peter. Okay.
No, actually, it says 2 swords. Let me read.
No. He says, whoever does not have a sword, let him sell his purse and buy one.
Yeah, verse 38. And they said, look, Lord, here are 2 swords. And he said, that is enough. Not all of you go get it.
Yeah.
If he wanted it for military or war, he would have said, no, that's not enough. You need 12.
So what about when Paul talks? You see, let's look at some interpretations.
You were wrong on that, or no?
No. Let me finish what I'm going to say.
But you're wrong because you're a proud fool, right?
No. I'm a proud fool. Excuse me, sir. You're the one who can't answer your question straight. No, you haven't. Let me answer you. When you look at the interpretations of certain church fathers, like Saint Ambrose, like Bernard of Clairvaux, or if you look at, for example, and even other theologians, later theologians like Saint Robert Bellarmine or Saint Thomas More, when you look at their interpretations of these verses, they make it very clear that there are 2 swords: the temporal sword and the spiritual sword. And we find parallels to this in several parts of the scriptures. For example, in the book of Judges, when Gideon marches off to go fight the Midianites, the army cries out, the sword of God and the sword of Gideon, spiritual sword and physical sword. And so it indicates that there was a physical war, but also a war against the spiritual forces that were involved. And also, when you look at Paul in Romans chapter 13, the leader or the ruler does not hold the sword in vain. He is a terror to the evildoer, but not to the righteous. So there is a concept of temporal sword, spiritual sword. Temporal war, spiritual war. That is why, for example, in Ephesians, Paul says, carry on the sword of the Spirit, the helmet of salvation, and he goes on the full armor of God. But then as well in Romans 13, he speaks of the use of the sword by the ruler against the wicked.
Okay, so let me address you now, and please don't interrupt. Let's just read the text and let the people decide. This is what it says, Luke 22, 36 to 38. Is it talking about two different kinds of swords or just two metal swords? Let's see. He said to them, but now let each one of you who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack, and let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. For I tell you, the scripture must be fulfilled in me, and he was numbered with the transgressors. For what is written about me must be fulfilled. And they said, look, Lord, here are two swords. And he said to them, it is enough. Now, if they were talking about all of them having a sword, plus another symbolic sword, why would he say that's enough?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing. Hold on, let me respond. You asked me a question.
You can address that, okay? Now, with regards to Paul, you said that Paul taught your idea. The fact is, this is what Paul taught. 2 Corinthians 10, 3 to 5. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds.
Yes.
We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive. And so it's not physical weapons of warfare.
So now, hold on. So let me answer what you're saying. So now you're isolating a verse. You're saying Corinthians, that's it. Well, excuse me. Paul is correct. Please let me finish.
To make you go and kill women and children.
Let me finish now. Let me finish now. Okay? Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Are you sure you're done? Because you keep talking.
Well, when you make so many false claims.
Oh, please, don't start doing these ad hominem attacks. But let me just finish But let me just tell you what I'm going to say here. You keep bringing up Corinthians. Okay, fine. Paul is right. Our war is spiritual. No one here in this conversation is denying that. Even if you went back to the Catholic Church when they were doing the Crusades, my friend, the Crusades understood that it was a religious war, Christianity versus Islam. That our war is not temporal. Our war is not done for the sake of plunder. You have to look at the rule of St. John the Baptist when he said, don't plunder, don't be cruel to anyone, but be content with your wages. Again, he never told the soldiers to leave the military, but he said, be just men. And Paul, let me finish now. Paul and Peter both say, 1 Peter 2:14, governors are made to punish the wicked. And what the Albigensians were believing was wicked. Now, you would not go to Peter or Paul and say, well, Peter or Paul, why are you bringing up the sword of the ruler? Our battle is spiritual. Well, of course it's spiritual, but that spiritual battle can be fought through physical means. That is why, for example, in the book of Samuel, Prophet Samuel tells Saul, the word of God, the Lord says, I will defeat Amalek. I will destroy Amalek. Well, does God destroy Amalek? Does the Spirit of God destroy Amalek? Absolutely. But at the same time, the armies of Israel destroyed Amalek, defeated Amalek. In the Psalms, for example, it says that God conquered the Ammonites. Well, did God conquer the Ammonites? Absolutely. But he used a physical means to do so. When the Jews, 40 Jewish bandits in the book of Acts, came to kill Paul, and they said, we will not eat or drink until we kill Paul. Did Paul sit there and say, well, my battle is not spiritual, so I'm not going to do anything? No, he went to the centurion, and the centurion had over 270 soldiers, spearmen, horsemen, very elite fighters, protect him. And they had weapons. And Paul was okay with that. Question. If Paul can use armies to protect himself, and when the enemies came, then the church can use armies to defend itself. And thus you have the Crusades.
Okay, did not go and get the centurion and tell the centurion.
Excuse me, no. The armies protected Paul, and Paul did not object. If an enemy comes, the armies can protect.
Centurion, and he was asked questions by the commander. That's why he was there. He didn't get them to go and kill all the women and children of the people.
Excuse me, no. That's not. I never said that. I never argued that.
Number of points. I'm going to address all of them. So don't interrupt now.
Oh, please, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. But don't start there and use this dictatorial language, okay? Go ahead, talk.
You said in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5 that although Paul says our war is spiritual, that he's also advocating going around...
That's not what I said. I said that spiritual wars can be fought through physical means.
Doing things consistent with wiping out the Cathars, that's what you're defending, that's the concept.
Absolutely, I'm defending it.
Let's just read the text for itself and see if your interpretation is okay, that although it's a spiritual war, it's also a physical one. This is what Paul says. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. Now, you brought up Romans 13, where it says punish the wicked and obey the government that punishes the wicked. But that's talking about not theological crimes, okay? Because at that time, the Roman emperor was pagan and was not Christian.
But could it not be applied to a Christian kingdom?
Christianity, it referred to common...
So hold on, so Moses was wrong? He used armies for religious means?
And things of that nature, do not oppose them in that regard. It's not saying agree with them when they go and massacre all the women and children of a civilization, the entire...
It wasn't a civilization, okay?
Out of context, don't interrupt, okay? And so the fact is that every text you bring up, you take out of context because you don't know how to eisegete the text. You read things into the text, which is eisegesis. You don't know how to exegete the text.
So when Moses killed 3,000 people for worshiping a golden calf, that was a theological issue, and Moses it was a spiritual issue, for one, because they were worshiping a false idol, and Moses used a physical means, swords, armies, killing, to destroy this spiritual problem. So, but you see, hold on, but you never dealt with the other issues I brought up. When the prophet Samuel said, I will destroy Amalek, well, did God destroy Amalek? Yes, he defeated the Amalekites. But my whole point is that he can use physical means in spiritual warfare. So when you had the Muslims coming in, raping Catholic women, crucifying Catholic men, taking Catholic priests, and ripping their intestines off, and then pulling their intestines until they died, and they were invading, they invaded Jerusalem, they invaded Syria, they were invading all these lands, and they were threatening to come right into Europe because they were going right into Greece. There needed to be a war done. And these people needed to be wiped out. The same thing with the Albigensian. The Albigensian was percolating their ideas all throughout France, and they were really ruining the Christendom, what it was at that time. Not just in southern France, but in central Italy, in Bulgaria, in parts of Greece, in Armenia. And the church had to do something to take care of this problem. Just like today, we have the homosexual agenda, we have the pro-choice movement, and they are destroying our Christian culture. But yet, unlike the Christians of today, we become pacifist and we allow wicked and evil people to take over the culture with their evil and false doctrines. It is because of people like yourself, with your modern day theology, that we have the problems that we do today. In fact, this was one of the struggles. Don't disrupt me. This was one of the struggles between the Catholic Church and Martin Luther, when Luther said it's okay for the Turk to come and invade Europe and not to do anything. St. Robert Bellarmine and St. Thomas More deal with this in their books, that Luther was for the Turks invading Europe and not using, the Pope should not have been involved in the military. He was against the Crusades. What about Lepanto? Tell me, who fought in the Battle of Lepanto?
You won't even let me address all the issues you brought up. You go on to other issues over and over.
No, it's the same issue because it's the same objective. It's the same objective, sir, and that's fighting evil.
Take a breath and stick with what you've said.
I mean, very much so.
That because in the Old Testament there were crimes of apostasy and heresy, that therefore this is the New Testament teaching as well. And I'm telling you, please don't interrupt, I'm going to give some arguments, that in the New Covenant things were changed. That when there was someone who left the faith, got into heresy, got into apostasy, The conclusion was not that we should kill them, was not that we should go into their civilization and destroy all of them, women and children, that this is not how it would be. And I'll prove this from Matthew 18, 12 to 14. It says, "What do you think if a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray?" Okay, so that would be the apostasy, the going into theological error. "Does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over 99 that never went astray. So it is with the will of my Father who is in heaven, that one of these little ones, not one of these little ones, should perish." So the word "gone astray" here is planeo, and it's defined as falling from the truth or being a heretic, if you look at the lexical material. So there's clear apostasy, heresy connotations going on here. And we know from the context in verses 6 and 15 to 17 that believers in Christ and the brethren of the church are here being discussed. So what this text is saying is that those who go astray or apostatize from the faith, are to be not to be killed, not to be executed. They are to be sought after. And we see also the same thing in James 5, 19 to 20. Let me go ahead and quote James 5, 19 to 20. This is what it says. Let me just bring it up here. Okay, it says, "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death." So when someone apostatizes, when someone starts believing false things like the Cathars, are we to then go slaughter them, go eliminate them?
Okay, for one thing, no. Let me answer that. So when you look at the writings of St. Thomas More says very explicitly that the Catholic Church does not kill heretics simply for what they believe in, but because they are violent. And when you look at what the Cathars were doing before, let me finish now. I let you talk. Before the Albigensian, for example, in the southern city, the French city of Brézire, there was a priest who was walking to his parish. A number of Cathars violently attacked him. They beat him, they wounded him, they even broke his arm. They took his chalice, they scoffed him, and then they urinated on his body. And then also the Cathars, they murdered the Viscount of Brézire, Raymond de Tragovel. When the bishop tried to fight the heretics, they broke his teeth. In another instance, a convert to Catharism and a knight named Gerard de Pepieu took two Catholic knights, put out their eyes, cut off their ears, sliced off their noses and upper lips, stripped them completely naked, and sent them off into the freezing cold. They were blind, could not find their way. One of them eventually froze to death.
Did children do that?
Now, let me finish now. Let me finish. So there was definitely a threat, just as there was a threat from the Muslims. Now let me tell you something. The apostles, when they were living in the Roman Empire, they had no army. They were under the mercy of the government, as temporarily speaking. They were under the mercy of the government. Now, when the Hebrews were living in ancient Egypt, they were slaves. They were persecuted by the Egyptians. They too had no power. But once they escaped Egyptian bondage, they had their own government, then they made their own armies. Just as the Christians were persecuted under the Roman Empire, and tens of thousands were butchered by the pagan Roman government, whether it be by Diocletian or Heraclius or others. But it took Constantine to raise an army in front of the Holy Cross, the true cross, and defeated the pagans and liberated Christians from this persecution. It took an army to end the persecution. And you cannot say that God's hand was not involved in that, would you?
Okay, so let's go to your claim that the Roman Church would never execute someone unless they also did violence, that it wasn't just because of...
No, that's not what I said. I said because the heretics pose a violent threat. Kind of like, you have to understand one thing. Like, you have to understand one thing. An ideology can be violent. Like, Islam is a violent ideology. So whenever you have that ideology, it is violent. It brings an atmosphere of violence. Not that all Muslims are going to kill. Let me finish now. Not that all Muslims are going to kill, but that Islam brings an atmosphere of violence, and therefore it needs to be suppressed. Now, stop. No. Because no. I'm correcting you. I'm correcting you. Don't talk over me. I'm correcting you. I'm correcting you.
I understood your correction, and I'm going to address it now. Is that okay?
But why do you have to interrupt me, though? Let me just correct you.
Because you go on and on with different...
Well, you go on and on as well.
To this issue of if the Catholics, killed people just because of their heresy, or if it was also because they posed a threat.
They did pose a threat. Though heresy does pose a threat.
Either a threat, or if they murdered someone, or a potential threat. And I'm going to address that now. On February 6, 1481, 6 months after the first tribunal of the Spanish Inquisition, there were 6 conversos who were accused of heresy. Do you know what conversos were?
Yes.
Okay. These were Jews who, because of the state, they said that they were Roman Catholic when really they were still going to the synagogues and not having their children baptized. And they were publicly burnt to death by a Catholic named Friar Alfonso D.
Do you know how many people were killed in the Spanish Inquisition?
So don't drift. So what was the potential threat of these 6 conversos who simply wanted to keep their faith, just wanted to live their lives, didn't want to get their children baptized and become Catholic? What was the threat from these 6 people?
Well, you have to understand, for one, I would like to ask you, since you think the Inquisition is like the worst, how many people were killed by the Inquisition?
Well, what was the threat of these 6 Jews? Because they were murdered, and you said they're only murdered if they pose a threat.
No, I mean, there was wrongs that were done in the Inquisition.
Oh, okay. So...
Oh, okay. At least I admit things, okay?
Right.
But let me tell you something. Now let me ask you this question. How many people were killed in the Inquisition?
Which one?
The Spanish Inquisition.
Spanish? I think Toby Green is right in his work, Inquisitions. He gives, he doesn't give the full number, but he gives numbers in each region, and I think they're pretty accurate.
So how many?
Read what he says. He says the Inquisition was at its most severe in Spain during the first 50 years after its formation in 1478, when it is estimated that 50,000 people were tried, a significant proportion as religiados burned at the stake. In some years, such as 1492, 2,000 people may have been relaxed in person, another 2,000 in effigy. Approximately 700 were put to death in Seville alone between 1481 and 1488. Another 50 in Rio. In the Crown of Aragon, meanwhile, roughly 1,000 were relaxed between 1485 and 1530. Between 1540 and 1700, 84,000 people were tried. And so those figures...
So how many people were killed?
Those figures...
How many people were killed? Because the Inquisition lasted for about 350 years, and estimates, if you go, for example, to Mr. Madden's book on the Inquisition, or you go to Henry Kamen or to Edward Peters, they estimate that in the 350 or so years in the Inquisition's existence, only about 3,000 to 4,000 were killed, and it's an estimate of 6 people a year. So that doesn't sound like an institution that is just bent on killing. I think the state of Texas kills more people than that. And let me tell you something. But hold on, let me finish. You're not letting me finish. Don't disrupt. I'm not done. Sir, don't disrupt. No, don't finish, sir.
You have 2,000. You have.
Are you going to let me finish? Are you going to let me finish? When you look into the works of Henry Kamen, when you look into the works of Edward Peters, who are some of the most reputable historians, they give the numbers of 3,000 to 4,000 people in 350 years. Does that sound like an institution that is just bent on killing? Absolutely not. When you look at the Aztecas, the pagans, they butchered around 25,000 people. In fact, when the Moors invaded Spain, do you know how many Jews they killed in about a year? Do you know how many Jews they killed?
Are you done?
Do you know how many Jews they killed?
Let me know when you're done.
Do you know how many Jews they killed?
Who, the Moors?
The Moors, when they invaded Spain, in the city of Granada. Do you know how many Jews they killed?
I don't know the exact figure.
They killed 3,000 Jews. The Muslims killed more Jews in 1 year than what the Catholics ever did in 350 years. In fact, And so it seems as though, sir, that you just love to focus. Yeah, read the book by Alvin Schmidt, The Dividing Line. He's a Protestant historian. What?
Cite what they do as justification for something being right. But anyway.
Excuse me, no.
In one book, excuse me, I'm going to mention Toby Green's Inquisition, which is 500 pages. I'm going to mention Thomas McCry's The Reformation in Spain, which is 300 pages.
Who's Toby Green?
He's a historian. I'm going to mention Michael C. Thompson, The Inquisition in History.
Hold on. So what are his credentials? Tell me.
These are all serious academics and historians.
And so Henry Kamen is not a serious academic. Edward Peters is not a serious academic. Madden is not a serious academic.
By Jonathan Kirsch, 286 pages. And so you have all these historians, plus all the ones that Green cites, stating it was way more than 3,000, and all the references are in this book. Okay,
you have to look at the later scholarship. You're looking at older scholarship.
No, this is new, up-to-date scholarship.
And so is Kamen, and so is Edward Peters.
Well, let me tell you when Green's book was published. It was published, it's actually published by a Catholic printing press in 2007.
Was he an historian?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Kirsch's was from 2000.
But you do realize, when you look at, for example, okay, so let me ask you this question.
Let me finish with my point, please. Don't interrupt. And so you have all these serious historians, and again, Toby Green cites Miguel, 1986, 1990, Henningsen, 1986, Bethencourt, 1994, Marquez, etc. All these historians, and he goes through each pocket where there was killings, and he gives the numbers from the primary records, and it's way more than 3,000.
And Kamen does the same exact thing. Well, some people say it's 4,000. My whole point, though, is that in every nation in the world, there's inquisitions in order to protect. Even America has inquisitions to protect itself. You do realize, though, that Spain. Let me finish now. You do realize that Spain was ruled by the Moors for 800 years. They needed to have a system in order to prevent Spain from being reconquered by the Muslims. Have you ever heard of the Morisco Revolt?
My answer is this. You should not judge the supposed Christian church by the activities of non-Christian institutions.
Excuse me. If America was invaded for 800 years, what do you think America would do?
Finish?
So what do you think America would do?
What's that?
What do you think America would do if it was invaded for ruled over by Muslims for 800 years? The Spaniards needed a way to protect its Catholic culture from taint, from invasion. That is why they had the Spanish Inquisition, and the danger was very real. I understand that there was abuses. There's abuses in all these systems, but my whole point is that the Inquisition was a necessary institution to protect Spain from being reinvaded by the Muslims. That is what we learned from Hurtado de Mendoza in the war in Granada.
The Spanish Inquisition persecuted Jews and Protestants as well who posed no military threat. And so, yes, Muslims, I could see maybe expelling them from your land or something of that nature, but to torture them the way they did and massacre them is not something God's people would do. This is not God's sanctified bride doing this. This is not the arbiter of God's final salvation program on the earth doing this. These are not regenerated Christian people torturing people. Are you familiar with how they tortured people in the Inquisition?
Well, if you look at the studies that Kamen provides, actually... excuse me, I'm going to answer your question.
Are you familiar with the torture mechanism?
If you look at the studies that were done by Kamen, by Madden, by Edward Peters and others... Well, actually, the method of torture, if you look at the primary accounts as well, the method of torture primarily was waterboarding, similar to what the United States does today. And in fact, in the majority of cases, in the great majority of cases, only a person was tortured no longer than twice. So there was actually a set of procedures that were done. But let me ask you this question. And also, Jonathan Kirsch is not a historian. He's actually an attorney. So, yeah, he's also an attorney. Jonathan Kirsch is an attorney. Okay? So he's not like some historian in
That was just one of the sources, and he has done work in his...
No, you lied. You said he was an historian for the Spanish Inquisition. He is an attorney. Jonathan Kirsch is an attorney.
Actually, he is a historian as well. He wrote a history of the end of the world.
Harlot by the Side of the Road? What is that, a history book?
These are works that deal with historical theology, history, things of this nature. And
Okay.
that's one of the sources, but he is competent, and he does quote...
So Kamen is not competent. So you know for a fact that Kamen is not competent. You know for a fact that Edward Peters is not competent. You know for a fact that Madden is not competent. You know for a fact that Mendoza is not competent when he says that the Moors invaded half, or pretty much all of southern Spain in the 1500s when the Spanish Inquisition was being carried out. And here's another question I have for you.
No, I'm going to address the point you made because you interrupted me. You said the primary thing was waterboarding. That's also wrong.
So waterboarding is wrong. So how are you going to torture or interrogate terrorists?
Grounding, okay?
So America is wrong to waterboard.
Yeah, of course.
You're a liberal. You're a left-wing liberal. You're not a conservative Christian. You are a left. You're no different than these atheists like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins who come out and say, "Oh, torture is wrong." So how do you expect us to prevent terrorism? I mean, if you were running Spain, Spain would be reinvaded.
And pour water onto them where they feel like they're drowning, many times resulting in them...
So what would you do? So you have a gigantic Muslim threat.
I think that's okay to do to Protestants and Jews.
So you have a gigantic Muslim threat in front of you. So you have a gigantic Muslim threat in front of you. What do you do?
In 1591, who was the secretary of the Suprema in Madrid, okay, he wrote instructions on how torture was to be carried out. This is what he said, quote, "If the prisoner should die or be injured or suffer heavy bleeding or have a limb mutilated during the torture, this is their fault and responsibility, not ours." Okay? And so it's not like, oh, we're just going to waterboard people. These are the official instructions given to the inquisitors who utilized all kinds of torture methods, such as the garrucha or strappado, which was a suspension device where they would be suspended and then dropped with a weight on their feet, dislocating their...
You do realize that that's all been refuted, right? No, you do all realize that the Spaniards never used such material. Have you ever read? You apparently you've never read the Spanish Inquisition by Kamen. You've never read some of the historians that have actually refuted these ideas that the Spaniards used waterboarding. But you've already exposed yourself as a liberal. You would allow the Muslims to what? Just to kind of sit around?
You've never read Marquez. You've never read Thompson.
You've never read Mendoza. You've never read Kamen. You've never read Madden. You've never read Peters. And your friend Kirsch, he's some attorney, some liberal attorney that you picked up. He has a BA in Russian and Jewish history. I mean, I don't see how that all of a sudden pertains to the Catholic Church. Now, let me ask you this question. In the time of the Albigensian Crusade, which you are so against, tell me something. Who were the true Christians?
Who were the true Christians?
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't the Albigensian, if it wasn't the Roman Catholic, who were the true Christians?
I think by that time, the church had gone into apostasy.
Oh, the Muslims and the Mormons make the same. The whole world went to apostasy. So the gates of hell prevailed then. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think you know what the gates of hell...
No. So the whole world went to apostasy. So there was no light. The whole world was in darkness.
I think God used the Reformation to stop the gates of hell from completely triumphing over the church, where people were worshiping idols, where people were viewing Mary as the one who dispenses all grace, things not taught by God at all.
So there were no true Christians in the 1200s.
Okay, so before the gates of hell could totally prevail against the church, God ordained the Reformation, as I proved. Which
you didn't prove anything. You just sat. You know what, sir? You didn't prove anything. You just said, "Oh, we had the printing press, Catholic invention." You had Erasmus, Roman Catholic.
Arguments which showed there were many things which had to happen shortly prior to the Reformation for it to have even started or succeeded.
So you're saying that? So hold on. So let me read to you a quote from Luther, when Luther himself said, "Suppose I should counsel the wife of an impotent man, with his consent, to give herself to another, say her husband's brother, but to keep this marriage secret and to ascribe the children to the so-called putative father. The question is such a woman in a saved state? I answer, certainly." Is this the divinely ordained Reformation that you love so much, with a man pouting this nonsense? Or what about when he says...
Hear the quote, because I was asking for the source. So if you could tell me the source and then read the quote again, that'd be good. What was the source for that?
Okay, let me get you the source.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay. When you look into the source is from Luther's letter to Melanchthon, August 1st, 1521, American edition, Luther's Works, volume 48, pages 281 to 82. This is the Reformation that you love so much.
Can I read what he said, because I didn't hear?
Well, okay, I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
He says, here, let me find the thing here again. Okay, suppose I should counsel the wife of an impotent man, with his consent, to give herself to another, say, her husband's brother, but to keep this marriage secret and to ascribe the children to the so-called putative father. The question is such a woman in a saved state? I answer, certainly. So, an adulterous woman is in a saved state. This is the Reformation that you love so much. And then he says here, and from the same source, he says, it is not in opposition to the Holy Scriptures for a man to have several wives. Oh, I thought we were in the New Covenant. What's this several wives stuff? What about this one? He says, as to divorce, it is still a debatable question whether it is allowable. For my part, I prefer bigamy to it. I mean, I can go on here. And so what about when Luther... Hold on a second. You talk about Jews? So what about Luther when he said... let me finish. Don't disrupt. My advice, as I said earlier, is first, that their synagogues be burned down, and that all who are able toss sulfur and pitch. It would be good if someone could also throw in some hellfire. Second, that all their books, their prayer books, their Talmudic writings, all their entire Bible be taken from them, not leaving them one leaf, and that these be preserved for those who may be converted. Third, that they be forbidden on pain of death to praise God, to give thanks, to pray, and to teach publicly among us in our country. Fourth, that they are forbidden to utter the name of God within our hearing, for we cannot with a good conscience listen to this or tolerate it. The rulers must act like a good physician, who, when gangrene has set in, proceeds without mercy to cut, saw, and burn flesh, veins, bone, and marrow. Such a procedure must also be followed. In this instant, burn down their synagogues, forbid all their enumerated earlier, force them to work, and deal harshly with them. If this does not help, we must drive them out like mad dogs. This is the Reformation that you love so much?
Are you going to let me answer?
I'm waiting. This is from the Jews and their lies.
Oh, you know you're not waiting. You just finished. Okay, so if you actually read his works to the Christian nobility of the German nation and the Babylonian captivity, you will see him explicitly condemn brothels, adultery, things of this nature, and Williston Walker. And
the Muslims and the Mormons do the same thing. They condemn adultery and bigamy and all this, and they do polygamy and all kinds of crazy stuff.
With regards to, what he said about the Jews allegedly, you need to realize that the Pope who actually condemned Luther and wrote a papal bull against him, excommunicating him, condemned Luther for his position on the state being wrong for executing people who hold to heretical beliefs. And so this is what happens. You go on the internet and you type in, bad stuff about Luther, or evil quotes Luther, and you find all these specious quotes when really you don't read the primary sources. You probably have
the Jews and their lies. That's the primary source.
You just go to websites that quote him, and you haven't read any of his work.
Excuse me. All historians accept that there was a book called The Jews and Their Lies. So would you agree with burning down synagogues and burning their books and making them work and forcing them to work? Would you agree with that?
Well, that's not the same as massacring...
Oh, please, no. Answer the question, yes or no.
Well, I think it's irrelevant.
It is very relevant. Would you agree with this? Is the Great Reformation, and you're a pro-Israel guy, I know. So this is the Great Reformation that you love so much. Would you agree with this?
Compared to what you're defending, it's not.
No. Would you agree with it, yes or no?
I don't have to agree with everything Luther said.
So compared to what I said, it's nothing. So you have no problem with this. This is nothing. Burning synagogues is nothing. Driving Jews out of a country is nothing. Excuse me. Driving Jews out of the country is nothing. And you do realize, sir, that during the Inquisition, there were numbers of popes who condemned Spain for what it did. Pope Clement IV condemned, for one thing, condemned France for persecuting the Jews. Pope Gregory X also condemned this idea. Pope Clement IV as well. Like I said, Pope Clement VI warned anyone who attacked Jews on suspicion that they caused the Black Death. There were popes who wanted mercy for the Jews. So unlike your Luther, the popes were more merciful. In fact, during the Spanish Inquisition, many of the Jews, in fact the majority of the Jews, were driven out of Spain. So where did they go? Did they go to Germany? Did they go to some Protestant country? No. The Jews, most of them went to Rome. And when we read the writings of Cayman, of Edward Peters, what we find is that for actually for some time, a good majority of the priests in Rome, in the Vatican, were of Jewish descent. So there was no hatred like, oh, the Vatican wanted to just butcher all Jews. In fact, Pope Pius XII rescued more Jews than anyone during World War II, than any individual. The Vatican rescued more Jews. Look at the investigation that was done by Pinchas Lapid. Pinchas Lapid was an Israeli diplomat, and he was the first to do an independent investigation on this issue. And Pinchas Lapid concluded that Pope Pius XII rescued over 860,000 Jews. So where is your Protestant churches doing that?
You're trying to acquit the popes.
No. Where is your Protestant church doing that?
Problems of any evils with regards to...
And you're trying to acquit Luther of any evils as well. You couldn't even admit to me that burning synagogues is wrong or not.
Pope Sixtus IV, who issued the bull Exeget Censasuris Affectus, which promulgated...
And see, now you're not even confronting anything I've told you.
I'm addressing it, but you interrupt me.
No, you're not addressing it. You bring something else.
Popes which supported the Spanish Inquisition and showed just how many there were. Okay, so this is what happened. Queen Isabella and her husband appealed to Pope Sixtus IV to establish Inquisition, to establish the trying and torture of these people and death of these people. Pope Sixtus IV agreed. Okay, he issued this bull which promulgated the Inquisition. Then he sent out people of the Dominicans and Franciscans to operate the Inquisition, and that's exactly what happened. And then many popes followed and affirmed this. And in fact, with regard to the medieval Inquisition, an archbishop wrote to Pope Gregory IX about a guy named Conrad who would torture people ruthlessly, and the Pope approved of him and called him a champion of the Christian faith. We could go through Pope after Pope.
So hold on a second now. But you're not even addressing anything I've told you about Pope Sixtus IV, the Sixth. What about Pope Boniface? That's not a lie. Let's look at what Henry Cayman and what Edward Peters and Madden address. That there were popes who said, yes, go against heresy, but don't use cruelty. And tell me, why did Rome accept the majority of the Jews who ran away from Spain?
Actually, Geneva took in more Jews who ran away from Rome, who was killing the Jews.
Reference, please.
Read any issue on the Calvin and Servetus issue, which talks about...
Baloney. Read any issue from a reputable historian. In fact, there was a saying during the Spanish Inquisition that Rome was the city of the Jews.
Pardon me?
I said, for one, I would like a reference. You didn't give it to me. And then I said that there was a saying back in those days that Rome was the city of the Jew. It was the city of the Jew because of all the Jews that that Rome absorbed during the Inquisition.
Yeah. You could look at McGrath's historical theology of the Reformation. You could look at Michael Horton, Was Geneva a Theocracy? Who quotes Gordon, who's the best Calvin biographer.
I want their bios. Who are they?
I just told you.
No. I want their bios. What's their credentials?
I believe teaches at Oxford, and he's a historical theologian.
Yes, he's an historian. I know about McGrath. I've read some of his works.
Knows about him. Horton, he's a professor at Westminster Theological Seminary.
Theological Seminary, not historian. So what about all these other wackos? You look at John Wesley, who also made up histories against the Catholic Church, and he was this kind of seminarian. It doesn't really matter. But, sir, you have yet to prove me wrong when I said that Rome absorbed the majority of Jews during the Inquisition.
Yeah, Rome killed.
No, it did not. If you look at... Have you heard of Joseph de Maistre?
Have you heard of Toby Gray?
No. Have you heard of Joseph de Maistre?
Have you heard of Thompson?
Have you ever heard of Joseph de Maistre? You're not answering the question. Have you heard of Joseph de Maistre?
Marquez?
Have you heard of Joseph de Maistre?
What about him? No, I haven't.
Okay. He was living in the time of the Inquisition. And I read his works on the Inquisition. And he makes it very clear that to connect Rome to every Inquisition that was done is an inadequate argument to use, because Isabella and Fernando himself, and this is all recorded by Maistre, whether you look at the tribunal of the Spanish Inquisition, whether you look at statements from Fernando and Isabella, all of them agreed that the Spanish Inquisition belongs to the monarchy. So while I will say, yes, there were abuses that were done in the Spanish Inquisition, those Inquisitions were done by the monarchy. The Pope didn't go out and say, oh, go ahead and kill Jews. This was done by the Spanish Inquisition. This was a monarchical issue. This was a government issue. This was an affair of the Spanish crown. This was not something that the popes invented. So if you want to just blame all of the abuses that were done to the Pope, it's completely inadequate. You can attack Isabella and Fernando all you want.
Who were in charge of Inquisition tribunals, if not Roman Catholics? Can you give some evidence for who these people were? Who did Isabella and Ferdinand appoint?
Well, they had all kinds of inquisitors. I mean, I can't remember every name of every inquisitor. But
who were they though? Like, what was their job before that?
Oh, some of them were secular. Some of them were part of the church. But my whole point is to blame the Roman Catholic Church for everything is not adequate. But my whole point is that the Inquisition was a necessary institution. It was a necessary institution because let me finish now. You had.
You just made your point.
So. No. I'm not done.
You just made
No, I did not. Okay. I will finish my point, and I will tell you when I'm done. Okay. The Spanish Inquisition. Let me finish.
Let me respond.
No, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point.
No, you're not going to let me respond to what you just
said. You're not going to let me finish. So I will. You're going to let me finish. Or you're going to hang up the phone.
Are you going to let me respond?
No, are you going to let me finish my point? 'Cause I'm not done. I let you respond. I let you talk. Let me finish my point.
You refute your point you just made.
I didn't refute nothing. Now let me finish. What's that?
You're not going to let me respond to you.
You're not going to let me finish my point. Let me finish my point now.
It was over. You're making a new point now.
No, I'm not. I will finish my point, and I will let you know when I'm done.
No, you won't.
So, yes, I will. So when you look at the Spanish Inquisition, you look at all of the threats that were around Spain. Hello? He hung up the phone. Hello? He hung up.